on Titan have to do with modern issues in global politics, global economics. I want to show you this clip here of the new season just started, the final season, and there's some deep reflection going on here. It's to me, it's almost like a reminder and a forewarning of something. So I have a theory that when series get popular, whether it's a Netflix series or the next anime that's interesting to people, um, I don't think these things get popular just because of light entertainment. I really think, I really do, that what series comes out or a book series or the movie, yeah, so many of them are just getting money off of cheap entertainment, repeating the same plots you've seen over and over again. But honestly, the shows that catch traction at a certain time and place, they do so for a reason. And human beings are ultimately, we're symbolic creatures. We create lots of meaning, even subconsciously. We do it all the time. And the kinds of series that gain traction at different times throughout the year, I really think have a reflection. There's a reason why they'll capture people at a certain time. And I think it's partly because it's reflecting, they often are reflecting current concerns and anxieties and difficulties for finding meaning that people are really processing at the time. And the creative author who came up with the series is probably someone who is creative. They're thinking about real issues in the world. They may be sometimes more than they realize might be reflecting some really serious things. They might just think that they're just a story author, but they might be really, they're someone who lives in the world today. They wrote the story today. They're affected by things going on in the world today, and that reflects in the stories they come up with. And ultimately, if you're going to get if a show really makes it, it's going to be funded for another production company to make a whole show out of it for mass distribution. They're not going to do that unless they think there'll be enough of an audience for it to make, to make some profit off of it. Well, for there to be an audience for it, that means the audience has to be interested in it. And yes, sometimes that means the show is just trash entertainment, but I think there's sometimes the show is really reflecting something that's really on people's minds, sometimes even subconsciously. That's what I'm seeing lately in this last season of Attack on Titan that started. When I was in college, um, in 2010 to 14 roughly, I remember my senior year is when I think Attack on Titan first got popular, and I was watching a lot of it back in fall 2013. And I've always been someone who I like some of these series. I don't watch them all the time. I'm not like a big anime nerd. Some people, that's their whole life, just anime, Japanese stuff, and they go to the Japanese conventions. I'm not really into that stuff. I was never really that into it, but I really like stories. I really like good stories, and sometimes you find some creative authors out of Japan who just have really unique ideas and unique visions. So honestly, Attack on Titan didn't strike me that way back in 2013. To me, it was more of an exciting show, and sometimes I just like to have some dumb entertainment. It was exciting, but there was a sense, yet there was a sense of something deeper. It just didn't seem to dwell on it back then. So spoilers ahead. If you care about spoilers, I don't care about spoilers. To me, I don't watch shows because the plot's interesting. I watch because it makes me think. Okay. I'll try not to spoil things that are really big plot points. I'm just going to generally talk about what the show is about. So, early on in the show, the premise is that you have all these people who seem to be the last of civilization, of all of humanity, and it's almost like a duty they have to live on because they're the last of humanity. And they exist behind these giant walls that seem almost impossible to have been built, but there's these giant walls, and they keep out these giant titans that are humanoid like creatures. They don't seem to have a mind, but they just are hungry, and if they see a human, they'll grab you and eat you. And it's really terrifying to watch when those scenes happen. It's a terrifying idea. And they look human, but you can't talk with them. They're not intelligent. It's just a terrifying concept. And but some of the characters, the main character in particular, had this deep drive since he's young to push past the walls. Most people are afraid to go outside the walls because the Titans will eat you. He wants to push past all that and take the risk, and he wants to go and find what's the truth. What is the truth? And I like that metaphor in a sense, like that sense of finding the truth. There has to be something more to the world than just what's in the walls of my experience. Um, they would have played around with that early imagery, but beyond that, it didn't seem like a particularly deep show. It seemed more like a drama. Um, and a lot of people realized that this author who came up with the series really matured a lot as he's been writing the series for the past several years. It seemed like it started more as kind of actiony, but then he would keep doing things that just obviously were just to completely subvert anyone's expectations of what you would do with a show like that. And he was obviously a creative thinker. You could start to see, oh, this guy is someone unique. This guy came up with this story. Um, and the nature of the whole story changes a lot by the time we've gotten here now to season 4. He's a manga writer, but his show became animated. So by the time the anime is caught up to get to now season 4, every season had a completely different feel, and it matured a lot. The themes they were kind of openly discussing. And what struck me now as season 4 started is there's just obvious imagery they're using of these times of World War II, and it's harkening back to that time, which for a lot of us that learned about it still seems distant to us. It seems like we would hear in um, history classes how World War One was the first modern world war, and World War Two was what that meant to people back then. It was such an atrocious, all these atrocities happening everywhere. They called it the war to end all wars. And when our generation learns about that, it seems like it's kind of in the past. And after that, we formed the United Nations so this stuff wouldn't happen again, right? But the truth is, there's lots of conflicts all around the world right now. It's happening again. And a common statistic I show people now, in the aftermath of World War II, in the aftermath of World War II, this huge war across the world, there's 25 million people in the world displaced. That's what the numbers showed from that time. 25 million people displaced. That's a huge number when you think about it. It's hard to visualize, actually. Um, the futility of statistics, like Salman Rushdie would say. Um, Today, the number of displaced persons in the world is 80 million. That's according to UN statistics, 79.5 million. Of that 80 million, a lot of them are internally displaced, so it's not quite the same, but there's still a huge number who are externally displaced, so refugees and asylum seekers. That number is like 26 million, I think. 26 million externally displaced plus another 3 million asylum seekers. Asylum seekers is a different political term, but really you're pretty similar to a refugee in a sense. So you could round that up to 29 million. So that's a huge deal. 29 million compared to after World War II with 25 million. That means there's something today, intuitively we know it, in the world, something is really wrong today in the world. And we don't think of it as a World War III because it's not like there's all these different conflicts and economic destitution in all these different parts of the world that are causing so many people to flee. But they're not one connected war like it was in World War II. And yet it's still a lot of different conflicts all around the world, and there's arguably a larger effect on how many people are affected, seeing the numbers of people who are fleeing. The major difference is you don't have as much direct uh, you don't have as much as direct outright formal war between a large nation and another large nation who are going at it and treating the whole world like their battleground. But what you do still have is large nations um, vying for different forms of control or influence in other parts of the world, often countries that are less economically developed, uh, by trying to like mess with their local politics or giving arms to the local insurgents because you think that they might oust the leader there that might, and then they'll get a new leader who might be more in favor of you, the larger country, your political interest. And these larger countries are playing with the world all the time, still like this. At least we don't, make an outright war, but there's still all these political battles throughout the world. In real human lives are affected. People are killed. People have to flee. Um, these are serious issues today. This is real life. So it's a reflection that's been on my mind the past few years as I've been working on this book on migration. Is that when I look at the numbers, it's hard to just look at the numbers and not see how this is a serious global issue, and a lot of people just don't see it as a serious global issue. They think of it as an issue for refugees. It's their problem. We call it global migration crisis as if the crisis was that people are migrating. The crisis is not that people are migrating. The crisis is that there's a war that made people leave their homeland, like the Syrian civil war, and people die and children die, and then Russian jets bomb hospitals. That's a crisis of morality and humanity. It's a humanity crisis. One acquaintance I know, a Syrian woman, that's the way she put it. She doesn't call it a migration crisis. She calls it a humanity crisis, because when one part suffers, the whole suffers. When humanity anywhere suffers, all of humanity suffers. And I think the problem today is we don't see it that way. We see it as that other country's problem, that other country's civil war, that the other refugee groups, they're refugees, and that's their problem. That's kind of how we're accustomed to seeing it. And one thing that's clear is we can't keep thinking that way. The issues we're seeing in the world cannot be addressed if we keep thinking of it as a separate country's problem. Coronavirus has proven the dangers of thinking that what happens in a country and in the other part of the world doesn't affect us. We saw that a major issue could start somewhere else and it quickly affect the whole world within less than a month. Um, this is serious stuff. There needs to be a shift in how we think about the world, the whole world. We need to stop using the old school paradigms of political science where they always say, well, every country just acts in its own interest, its own best interest, and they use that as a justification and an excuse to say that powerful countries can take advantage of other smaller countries if they want to, because it's in their best interest, and that's what everyone does anyway, is act for their best interest, so that's okay. That's how people in political science would talk, and that cannot continue anymore today. I think a lot of people in my generation were tired of hearing that baloney. We know it's not true. We need to act like we're global citizens and not just the people in college who quoted Socrates, who said he was a citizen of the world, and people would say that in your college administration, but they didn't really think that. They don't really see themselves as global citizens. They talked about the idea of it, but when they're confronted with someone of a completely different culture and experience from them, they just don't really want to deal with it. They don't really want to take seriously what would it mean if the United States and other larger countries, if by default we took into careful consideration would our how would our decisions that we make affect other countries around us. We don't really think that way. We we we're always, our foreign policy trend really is about us. We'll consider how it might affect other countries only when it's like in our economic interest. We don't consider it when it's about our foreign policy decisions leading to other people and other countries being killed. We don't care. Most Americans don't even seem to know about all of that. They don't know that we have a long history of foreign policy that basically abuses other countries, which is explicitly immoral. It's wrong. So something needs to change. And I think people in the world are feeling that sense of that something, this has gone too far, something needs to change, and there's a sense that we feel like you're getting close to a boiling point. And I'm not saying whether that's right or wrong, I'm just saying how it feels. And that something needs to change. And I have absolute hope that in the next 10 to 20 years something is going to change, because my generation's getting tired of the excuses we've heard about why things can't change. Those are excuses. Something needs to change. So when I see like series like this, like Attack on Titan comes out the last season, and the opening song expresses a sense. It sounds like a disturbing song to me. I didn't almost want to hear it at first because it kind of disturbed me, but it's expressing a sense of dread at a state of global affairs in the world, right? And it's harkening back to the World War II image, making a connection to the modern day, because people back in World War II are not watching this TV show. People today are watching this TV show. People today are coming into an experience where maybe they don't know they're doing it, but they're connecting their modern day understanding of the world by watching this series to a state of the world that looked very similar to World War II. And it should make people think about those times and the darkness of those times. And as in my mind, this should be a forewarning that if we don't change some major things now, don't be surprised if things get even worse and get as bad as they were back in World War II, with the Holocaust and dictators going way too far, and tons of global conflict, outright conflict, and lots of death. We need to make a change now before it gets even darker than it's become already. There's definitely hope. There's definitely hope. But I'll show that. I'll show you the clip here. I'll show you the clip that compares. Someone did some brilliant stuff comparing actual World War II footage to the actual Attack on Titan 4 opening song, because they're showing where this imagery comes from. It came from real life stuff. And the ending song, though, the ending song for Attack on Titan Season 4, the ending song also has this expression of sorrow, but it ends with imagery that is hinting at a hope. It's hinting at a hope, and it's kind of presenting it in a way where you can tell we're not quite there yet, but there's something almost within grasp, and it presents this light of hope. Attack on Titan is an interesting series like that. It's not my go-to series as a source of hope for life. It's more of a dramatic show. There's many other things I'd rather watch for when I want more hope about how we change things. But I think there's a place to have sometimes just those negative reflections, because they are a reflection. They're not making stuff up. They are reflecting real life world darkness, real life darkness in the world. And we need to take the forewarning seriously. Please go watch this guy's video. This guy deserves a good like for his video. He obviously put a lot of work into it. This guy or girl, I don't know who they are, but I'll show 1 minute of it. And just be prepared. It's negative, but this is real life stuff. So, just as a final thought, uh, I when I was growing up, I always liked a lot of the Japanese shows that came out. They were, I used to love the Gundams. Little boys loved the giant robots fighting each other. But where did all these ideas come from? Um, you see, all the explosions are really well animated in these shows. I've heard it said before that uh, part of this is a little speculation on my part. I don't know Japanese culture as much as people who live there, but I've definitely heard it said that one of the reasons why in so many animes you see so much attention to detail put into how to animate explosions. They have the most realistically animated explosions you'll see in any animation medium. Why do people put so much work into that? There's a sense that there's kind of an image that's deeply ingrained in the kind of consciousness from the from the atomic bomb being dropped on them. And the image, if you see those images of the early days of the atomic bomb, they're astounding images. And it is kind of like a paradoxical image because there's this sense of looking at something really awesome and almost beautiful in the sense it's shaped almost like a flower sometimes. And yet, it's not beautiful. It's a weapon of mass destruction, and people died. Massive amounts of people died from these things. And it's a paradoxical image that it is both. It has this kind of majestic feel to it, but it's also horrifying. It's just horrifying to watch. Um, Maybe that's why there's a sense that it's just hard to get that image out of the mind when it's had a big effect on you. Um, I like that in the Attack on Titan season 4 opening, it's beautifully animated, the scenes of the flamethrowers and the bombs. But then I think they're assuming that the audience is going to be intelligent enough to realize that that is real life World War II imagery that they were basing the animation off of, which should make you think automatically that it should make you automatically question if you should really be finding the song beautiful. It's not meant to be a beautiful song. It's meant to be something that makes you think.